So let's begin. And I want to start by just thanking you all again so much for making the choice and priority to be here with us. And we've called this series that we're offering on Sunday afternoons for educators, Connecting to Self, Nurturing Others, knowing that throughout the week, so many of you are sleeves rolled up, hands on, experimenting and discovering how to nurture others in this time and setting. So we want to support you with nurturing and connecting to yourself during this time. And the possibility and the inspiration for offering this whole series was initiated by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. So I want to acknowledge them as a public charity and a wonderful and supportive institution supporting us to bring the internal family systems model out into our world in so many creative ways. So Seth and I are both partnering with them to offer you an assortment of ways to nurture yourself and experience the benefits of this amazing model during this time. So I'll just briefly introduce myself as we launch in and give a little context, and then I want to, then I'll turn over to Seth for the next stage of our time together. So my name is Joanna Curry-Sartori. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm also the founding director of the Self-Leadership Collaborative, which is an organization specifically focused on partnering with schools to implement social and emotional well-being in a way that's really sustainable, innovative, and a culture that's a way of being, as opposed to so much a curriculum in a box, another initiative. We know there's so much initiative fatigue. So we really see it as a way to partner and connect with educators to bring about well-being for everybody. And our approach is specifically inspired and informed by internal family systems. For those of you that don't know IFS, it's cutting edge, evidence-based psychotherapeutic model. But more than that, those of us who practice the model really appreciate it as a paradigm for living, a paradigm to help us deeply discover how to connect to ourselves and relate to ourselves, and then in that transform our relationships. So this model has profound insight, practices, and framework for helping us be our best selves. And it's so much what we need to call on at this time as educators and as a larger society. And so that's what has inspired this series, among other things, to look at how we can support educators in accessing our best selves. So before I pass to Seth, just a little bit of reflection that's been coming up for me that feels related to today's theme. This last week, actually, the opportunity to facilitate community teas for the staff in 6 schools here in Connecticut. We did it on Zoom or Google Meets, depending. And it was a chance for educators first to just really get quiet and pause and check in with themselves and find out what have been the different parts of them that have been coming up in this time, and to make space to acknowledge that, and then to share with each other and to hold a space to care for each other and honor each other. And in that time together, they spoke a lot about the students who are not only struggling academically, often emotionally either shut down or dysregulated. Perhaps they know that their students are in difficult or stressful environments. So the teachers were expressing what they're seeing as far as their students, but then they dug deeper into what is that meaning to them and what are the things coming up in them. They're naming their sadness, naming parts of them that are feeling inadequate for not really being able to fulfill their passion and their duty to educate. They're missing the comfort and the resource of each other, and saying, you know, I didn't get into this profession to be in a chair all day long facing a screen. I don't even know, this is so unnatural for me. And this, along with educating their own children and juggling all the myriad stressors that we have during this time. So it really just helped me further appreciate the complexity of this time and some of the core questions that I think we're going to touch on today. How do we effectively connect with our young people so that their learning continues and they feel a part of a community? How do educators continue to care for themselves, not lose hope, handle the overwhelm, sustain their energy and capacity through this time? And overall, how do we truly create learning environments where there's connections so that authentic deep learning can happen? And for that, I'm really thrilled to be to explore these questions, welcoming Seth. He's actually so much of the background to help us gain insight around this. So let me tell you a little more about Seth before I pass it over to him. Seth became an internal family systems practitioner in 2012. He's an insight coach and leads individual sessions, couples communication sessions, and groups. He creates a safe space and guides people to care for themselves in loving and insightful ways, which, as we've been collaborating and partnering, Seth, I so much find that to be true. That's very much my experience. He has a PhD in organizational management with a specialization in leadership, and he holds a master's in education. So he's both worked in the educational domain and many other fields. He has an IFS self-led parenting page. He's been leading parenting webinars actually over the past couple of weeks. And he most recently has been coaching the principals in schools. He's based in Michigan, but supporting the work I'm doing here in Connecticut. We're piloting IFS in school systems, and he's been a coach for our principals in those schools. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to you, Seth. I understand you want to start by leading us in a bit of a meditation, which would be lovely.
Sure.
Thank you so much for being with us, and welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So this, if you don't mind, if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can. If you don't, that's okay too. So maybe just take a couple deep breaths and center yourself. Notice your body here in the chair or standing, wherever you are. Just feel yourself in the place where you are. And if you don't mind, just think of one student that you work with that might be struggling or that you have concerns about. And then notice, what does your mind say about this student? What are some of your thoughts, some of your concerns that are swirling around in your mind? Now take a minute and see if this might be new or different for you, but notice that you can drop your attention from your mind down into your heart space, almost as if your heart had a lens that could see the student. Another way to think about that is, how do I feel towards the student? What does my heart feel towards the student? So from that lens, see the student or the child in front of you and ask from your heart, what does that student need? Do they need to be seen? Do they need to be understood? Do they need someone to believe in them? In your imagination, you might even notice that that student could almost either tell you or even put thoughts in your mind or somehow show you, what is it that he or she needs right now in this hard time. And finally, ask either yourself or even if you can ask the child in your imagination, what do you need to light the fire of engagement for learning? What needs to happen so that you can flourish? And if you did this for a particular student, you can jot down a few notes. maybe just notice that from this place, you might be able to have insights you didn't have before. Maybe a step one before we get to the assignments, or step one before we try to explain a concept. And then maybe finally, notice how your body feels now that you've entered this compassionate, more open space. And just measure your feeling now. What is your capacity to be present with your children in your classroom or your students? How much more space do you have? How much more patience do you have? How much more wisdom do you have? Just from this short meditation. You know, maybe we can come back here and Joanna, you're muted.
Wow. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
I pictured my son, my almost 11-year-old son, and it gave me a completely different insight into what he needs during this time, and opened a different space of readiness in me. So I would be really curious if we could invite folks to come onto the chat and just briefly share what insights do they have about what our young people need right now. How would that be okay? We could share that. Okay, so if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you find where it says chat, and you can just drop in there if there's words or phrases. What do you see that our young people need right now? Someone to see them, believe them, certainty. Part of my student needs to be accepted in their struggles. Part of them also needs to be held in high standards. Hope. From fear to nurture and acceptance. Yeah. What I got was a sense of company and encouragement. Like I realized so much of my son's learning is happening online, and how important it is for me what he needs for me to be with him in the learning as a parent in that space with him too. So thank you for those of you who gave us a little flavor there. So, so then Seth, I wonder if we could take off there and start exploring. So what is your sense about what students need right now? I know you have a real passion for creating safe learning environments, and what does that mean in this time? What are safe learning environments? What do our students need right now?
Well, I guess I want to start with, when I was thinking about this talk, my wife works at the University of Michigan, and in her department, they shifted some of their strategic goals, and moving the first goal being the health and well-being of students, faculty, and staff. And when she told me that, I was kind of blown away that, you would think like enrollment or making sure we get our students back was number one. And I think that speaks to what we as teachers and coaches and others, if we put that first, I think we will get those outcomes that we're hoping for. Somebody said, we need to also have high standards. I think that's true. But I think what we've seen, through brain research and other types of, just observing students, that when students are struggling, when they have stress, when they're really just trying to make it, the parts of their brain that we are needing to be available for learning and for engagement and creativity are kind of are shut down. So, really, as teachers, like, what can we do to help create a safe learning environment. I think it's what just happened in that meditation is to think of children as beings that need health and well-being, and to take the get it done part of us, that we need to get this stuff done, and say, and just believe that that will happen if I focus on the health and well-being first. Because what we want, from when I have a master's in education, and I was a Montessori teacher for years. I used to teach community college, and I know without engagement, learning doesn't happen. And without a safe, nurturing learning environment, we don't have engagement. So if our goal is to have high standards and our goal is to get it done, we need to start at the beginning. So what does that look like? As many of you said, that the students do feel seen, they feel accepted, they feel like we believe in them, they feel heard, they feel understood. So as we check in with students, if they even get a little bit sense that you are seeing them, I see you, I get you, I believe in you, and hopefully our actions display this. Whether or not we're a patient with an assignment, or whether or not we give some extra help, or we talk about their interests, any sort of, like when we do this work with folks and we go inside of ourselves and we meet our parts and inside of us, what soothes ourselves is when we feel seen, when our parts feel seen by us. But you might notice even in our own families, like in our friend, who are the friends that we hang out with, are the people that see us, and we don't have to carry our armor, we don't have to be something, we don't have to work hard to feel at ease.
That's just really resonating.
I just want to say, like, try to avoid a pressure cooker, like, pressures and deadlines. We just have to keep gauging how much of a pressure cooker are these kids in, because if they're feeling a lot of pressure, it's just going to create shutdown, it's going to create acting out, it's going to, things like that.
Yeah, what's really resonating too is, as I was connecting with teachers, especially during this week, and hearing, that there's so many challenges to engage the students right now. So some students aren't even showing up in the online classroom spaces. There isn't something drawing them. So the question is, what would be a meaningful draw? Well, I imagine, if I feel like I'm going to be seen and somebody's going to check in with me and care about me personally and want to know how I'm doing and what's like for me right now, I'm going to want to show up to that.
Right.
Or if there could be a space with my classmates where it's like that, I would want to show up for that. Or if I have some really intense, difficult stuff going on and there was somebody one-on-one who wasn't agenda driven, your assignments aren't in, but they're like, hey, what's going on right now? How is this for you right now? Any challenges? Like, if there's a safe way, and I imagine we have to really customize it, but I'm just, wow, if I could be seen and heard, I would want to show up for that. And then I might be available for learning.
Right. Yeah. And I think so much I've seen, I was ahead of a school for a while too, that it's so easy to think that we could manage students to help them through the steps to get it done. And we can, and it can even look like an A kind of paper, an A project, but their heart isn't in it. And they haven't really engaged. So the learning isn't really as present as if they wanted to chew it up and, find how do we engage.
Well, and that brings up too, like, of all the things we learn in school, how often I think we underestimate that an enormous part of education always has been how to be a social human being and how to be an emotional human being in a healthy way, and how vital those skill sets are to be, successful in life. So what are we teaching our young people right now about how to relate to their emotions, how to handle life stressors, how to look at challenging situations and not run away from them or shut down, but to engage and collaborate and be creative and discover possibilities? Like, that learning could happen right now.
Right. And I was thinking about this, that as a teacher, you might be thinking, how do I do this? Like, this
Right.
sounds great, but it
Right.
sounds kind of lofty. It might even sound touchy-feely or something like that. And I'm the touchy-feely guy, so.
Yeah, yeah.
But what I've noticed for me is if step one is what's happening inside of me
Mm.
instead of what's happening inside of the student first. I know I'm
Mm.
just promoting that we need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But if we don't
Mm-hmm.
know what's happening inside of me first,
Mm.
it's very challenging to tap in. So if you noticed, if you think back when I said what's happening in your mind about this child, you might have listed what they're doing, what they're not doing. They're behind on this, they're behind on that. They haven't been doing X, they haven't been doing Y. And then I said, okay, now drop into your heart. How do you feel towards the child? How's your heart feel? And all of a sudden you're like, oh,
Mm.
they need acceptance. They need to be seen. They need to, and all of you wrote those things on the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just by dropping into your heart, you have a new lens to see. Now,
Mm.
in IFS, we believe that we are our first primary caregivers. So if you're noticing stress in yourself, if you're feeling overload, if you're feeling those things, it's so important to try to find ways to tend to ourselves and to notice, how am I doing? And if you have your own strategies for finding ease and finding calm and finding peace and connectedness,
Mm-hmm.
even just a meditation like this, I think for me is really helpful, to just to get out of my head for a moment, because our head can hold 1,000 different things that aren't done.
Mm-hmm.
And it can really be a lot of weight.
Mm-hmm.
But our heart just kind of sees, it's almost, I don't know if you've seen those cartoons floating around Facebook, the heart and the brain, and they're so different. They talk to each other. I don't know if you've seen
Mm-hmm.
those, but what's interesting is when we get into a space of more peace and calm, which we call self, our core self in IFS, you'll notice that the students or your children or your family start also calming and getting more centered. So I've used this analogy many times already if you've been watching my other videos, but if we are the weather, our students are like the barometer. So as you know, the barometer measures the atmospheric pressure, and our
Mm-hmm.
vibe as a teacher, our energy that we're giving out creates the type of atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's virtual. And if we can get calm and into a loving place and, in a way of acceptance, it helps them go from a place of, am I in trouble? Have I done my assignment? Protect, skirt, do just enough to get by, to, oh, this is a welcoming place.
Mm-hmm.
Now my need to protect or my need to run could settle down, and I could actually show up because you're creating, you're being safe with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, and what strikes me too in what you're saying is, I remember when we were discussing this a bit the other day, that we intuitively know what the students need. So often we're looking for the tools and the techniques and the phrases and the curriculum, like, well, how do I manage students now and teach them social emotional learning now on an online platform? In a 5-minute meditation with you, we each found that we actually have that state of being in ourselves and could tap into our
right.
innate wisdom. So when we're in that mindset, when we're in that space, we intuitively know moment by moment what our students need.
That's right.
And so the answer to this question of what do the students need and what should I give them, moment by moment, we can source that inside of ourselves if we can get into that state you're describing.
That's right. Yeah, Dick Schwartz says that when we're in self, we have natural wisdom. And I find that to be
Yeah.
true, that when I try to find strategies to even help my clients, when I use those strategies, and it's more of my head trying to fix them, solve them, rescue
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
and they kind of hold, they're like, this doesn't
Yeah.
sound great to me.
Feels artificial.
And it also, what's the
Yeah.
underlying message? Like, you have to be rescued. Like, you don't have the strength yourself, or
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of in a way judgmental maybe if we think we need to
Mm-hmm.
rescue.
Mm-hmm.
But when we kind of come more from a heart space, more from our core self, you're right, there's this natural wisdom. And so to
Mm-hmm.
ask, what do I do when my students aren't engaged? If we gave you a canned answer, humans are so complex, there's no one answer that would work. So by just dropping into our natural wisdom as a teacher, like you guys are teachers here, you're called here. This is your calling. So you have abilities to tap in, and think of it like tuning in, just like with an infant, like you attune so you know their needs. So I think of it like, if something's just out of focus and you dial it in just to really see or to really hear, like the old radios. People probably don't know this, but when Joanna and I were kids, we used to have these radios with dials, and you'd have to just barely tweak it to find the station and have it be clear. And as we attune to our students, we'll know what they need. You can trust yourself.
Yeah. So we have that measurement tool, that ability. If we just, it's really about that state of being, and whether we call it being mindful or in whole brain or a growth mindset. It's so interesting. We've talked about it in so many ways in education, but it's that state of being that we're talking about cultivating, not something more to do.
Right. And in IFS, we would say to be in self. It's like our natural way.
Right. Leading from self, leading from that state of being.
Yeah. And one thing too is when we're in that state and we're looking at our children or our students, whether it's preschool through college students, we often see their behavior. And when I was a preschool teacher, what I think one of the most brilliant things somebody said to me was, look for the need under the behavior. So when you see students disengaged, if you see students, not putting forth the effort, whatever it may be, if you think, what's the need here? You'll have insights. Or if you ask the student, what's the need? Like what's happening for you? Instead of what's your plan to get this done, maybe what's happening for you that's making this challenging. And if they tell us, that actually gives us clues to, oh, I can help you with that. That's something I could work with.
And that sounds like another way of talking about the different parts of a student. So we may see that they're reactive, or see that they're disengaged, or see that they're frustrated. And if we can remember that that's a part of them coming up inside to try and help, but we remember that's not all of who they are, and we can talk to them or say, so it sounds like there's a party that's really frustrated. What's that part need right now?
That's right.
And
because exactly. Yeah, because I love that. And if this is new to you, what does it mean? Parts, like you might say, oh yeah, part of me is really frustrated, and there's another part of me watching me going, why are you being so frustrated? Right. And there's another part that really wishes that I could be doing something else, and that's natural. Our mind has multiplicity, and but you're right in that these parts are trying to help. So why would I disengage? Well, maybe for a lot of students, it's because I feel like I'm going to fail. And if I don't engage, I can't fail. It might be that I'm just missing my friends so much that I can't even bring myself to do this right now. My daughter was telling me how hard this must be for students. She's a freshman in college, or now a sophomore. But like she said things like, these students are used to being alone with each other at school, doing things without their parents hanging over them. So one advice is to let them have space and let them connect with their friends, because that's part of the social experience of being in school. And trusting the teachers to guide them. So a lot of parents, I think, could be over managing, possibly.
Yeah. Well, my sense is that because there's so much unknown, we've lost so many of our coordinates during this time. Whatever our go-to response strategy is, or the different parts of us that come up in a challenging situation, it seems like it's all amped up. You talked about dialing. It's like everything a lot of our responses went from a 5 cranked up to a 10. And so you toss it together in a house, and I'm picturing you got a high school student, a college student, or younger kids, and everybody's more amped up. So the parents are like, out of their comfort zone. Am I supposed to manage? How am I supposed to control this? How much do I let go? I'm also supposed to be getting my job done. Then the college students like needing help, maybe out of their comfort zone to be organized enough to get stuff done. On the other hand, leave me alone. I don't want to be touched because I'm a college student.
And just notice how fast your voice is going, and how like that really sends us into a place that's different than this, right? So
Yeah.
then when one of our students or one of our come to us, even if you're the teacher
Mhm.
feeling like that, and then they
Right.
ask a question, it's so easy to respond with that kind of energy. Like we
Yeah.
just want to, like whack-a-mole, trying to take care
Yeah.
of everything.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's all these
and,
different responses, all these different parts of us
right.
popcorning.
And that's why I love your model of pause,
Mm.
because in that moment, like if you feel that kind of energy to wait, like I am not in a state to talk right now. Let me just
Yeah.
slow it down. And not, I use
Yeah.
that dial too. Like, let me dial it back. Let me just ask
Yeah.
my whole insides, my nervous system. Is it
Mm.
okay if we just
Dial it down. Dial
dial
it
it
down.
down
Yeah.
and just, and to pause. Because, there is something to be said for, there's people say like, if, as a teacher or as a parent, you need, I don't know how many, if there's research now, whether it's 10, 20, 30 positive comments for every harsh comment
Right.
for the student to balance the feeling of being shamed or to balance the
Right.
feeling of being criticized.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so every time we respond with a slight bit of annoyance or we respond with anxiety and they sense that in our voice, there's an underlying message that I'm not happy with you right now. You're not
Mm-hmm.
enough, or you're too much,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which does send those children's parts into blockading, to running. Because
Mm-hmm.
if I can't feel like I'm not enough or too much with you right now as my teacher,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like if that's the message, I'm out of here. Or I'm going to push back. I'm going to roll my eyes. I'm going to do these things. But if we dip into our hearts, we don't see them that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We kind of go, oh, I see your tenderness. I see your vulnerabilities. I see what you need. And I might be the only one who sees it.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that if we are that person, that our students might then say, yeah, I do need help. This is where
So,
I'm stuck.
so, so I want to ask we take it one step further, because my sense is when I connect with educators that it's that profound belief in human beings and children and the compassion so often that's brought them into this profession. They've cultivated in this profession.
Mm-hmm.
They have a passion for caring for young people, and yet then there's sometimes I think a guilt and a frustration and disappointment that in the moment it can be so hard to actualize that. So they get on a Zoom call and one kid loses it and starts swearing, or they're the teacher who also has 3 young kids at home, and their children are pulling on their thing, and they're feeling guilty that they're giving attention on the screen to students while their
Right.
own kids need, and they're flustered and overwhelmed, or all these different parts of them might get activated. What advice during this
Mm.
very busy, full on time would you give to a teacher who's they ascribe again to the philosophy of this, but what practically little bite-sized
Yeah.
pieces, what can they do in the moment?
Well, for one thing, it's this just sounds like, oh, everybody says this or whatever, but I think actually stopping and taking a couple breaths before you speak is really helpful, because oftentimes when we say things we wish we wouldn't have said, it's because it's a quick snap reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Something's happening and we just fire something off. So just again, slow it down, take a few deep breaths and
Mm-hmm.
think, what's the need here?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you respond, and also, can I bring curiosity here for a second? Can I really just be open and be curious? Like, what is happening for this student who just swore?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I see it like you're a problem and I'm so stressed, I need to stop that so I can get to this. Um, really nothing much is going to happen, because that again, we're
Mm-hmm.
shifting the climate of our online moment here. That now the
Mm-hmm.
teacher's frustrated, the kids are feeling, the rest of the kids are feeling it. But if we say, this is even in this crisis, this is a moment to demonstrate humanity. So
It's beautiful. Yeah.
of course you're upset and swearing right now, because right now it's been a long time and we're all fed up.
Yeah. So
I don't know
really
anyone
getting
right
them.
now who hasn't said this week has been almost like the week where it's starting to crack. Like
Yep.
right now it's
Yep.
May 17th,
17th. Yeah.
and I don't know if it's the supermoon or something else, but something is cracking. I feel it. Everybody feels it.
Yeah.
So of course you're upset. I
Yeah.
get that. And what do you need right now? What's
That's
happening
beautiful.
for you guys? Because even taking a moment to say, what's happening with you guys? Like, does anybody need to report anything that's happening? It's almost like, let's just keep moving on past what's actually happening and do these studies. It's almost like saying, like, let's take this Lego and attach it to glass. Like, it's just not going to work. And by asking what's happening for you, what do you need, and somehow introducing the topic in a way that gets their brains starting to churn, now we have another block that information could be attached to. But we can't
That's
just
beautiful.
press
Yeah.
information onto something when there's no receptivity.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and again,
so
when you said like to go on to the learning, and I'm like, but that is the learning. The
right,
how are you? What's it like right now? How are you navigating? That is the learning.
right. And we watched President Barack Obama give the commencement speech last night.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I don't. Hopefully, everybody got to see it. And his advice was things like, there was really human focused, like looking out for each other, collaborating with each other,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
finding ways to look at how do we move forward, how do we help each other, how do we take our next steps.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was very moving. It inspired me. It made me think, what can I do? Like my brains, like my creativity started flowing because I felt held by him. I felt like he was like holding us in that moment and inspiring connection, not divisiveness. Um, so maybe that's part of our job, is to really hold our students in a way where they feel like we believe in you as a group, and we believe in you could work together. I'm hoping that there are still times where students are working in groups. There's breakout sessions, and there's ways of doing it with technology where students can still work together, help each other, be there for each other.
So I'm glad you're going there for a moment. So when you put on kind of the fact that you've been a head of school, you've studied organizational development, so you have like a systemic organizational leadership lens that you can look through as well. When you think about, what are the possibilities for how do we collectively in our learning communities focus on social emotional well-being? I mean, in one sense, it comes down just to these micro moment by moment interactions. But if you were speaking to principals or leadership, do any other thoughts bubble up about how could we bring that into our schools right now, into our communities?
Well, if I was leadership, the first thing I would think of is, how am I doing that for my staff? Do my teachers feel seen? Do my teachers feel heard? Do they feel held? Do they feel supported? And I would probably say, and I think there's enough research to support this, and I wish I could point to that right now, but let's all look at the research that shows what social emotional development does for outcomes. Because as a principal, I have to think of the outcomes too, that we have to have good test scores, we have to have all that. But we know studying for the test doesn't necessarily work. Or if it does work, we know that it doesn't really mean deep learning.
It doesn't stick in a beneficial way long term.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we say our number one priority is to help students feel safe, feel open, feel accepted, feel supported, we're actually creating the optimal learning environment so children can get good grades and can do well. So first of all, like when you look at research on how do you make culture change in organizations, it's what we keep talking about that's important. As the principal, if I'm saying this, how is it going in your classroom? How are children feeling? Do you know the pulse of their emotional well-being? If not, start there. There's different assignments you could do, like talk about what it's like right now, write a story about being at home, stuck in this, not connecting with your friends, or, you'll get insights about what's happening for them. And telling stories about when it works, like as the principal, we tell stories about how, look what happened in this one classroom, they've been doing this, and the students were thriving. And then when we hire people who have social emotional intelligence. That would be a high criteria for me as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I ask those kind of questions in an interview and somebody doesn't know how to talk about the importance of social emotional well-being, you might say that might still be a really great teacher and they have potential there. Let's hire them and train them. But if I really get a sense that somebody doesn't really care about that, that would not be somebody I would be looking at. And like, how do we lead meetings? Do we? And I can say, as a head of school, it's not easy. This stuff it's kind of like, there's the promised land. I'm trying to get there, but I don't always make it. And when I don't, ideally we can show up and let them know where I failed. I wish I could have done that. And I can say it really takes everybody to make a culture not feel toxic, or to make it feel like a healthy emotional culture.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not sure if that answers your question, but.
Well, it's beautiful, and it feels like there's so many aspects. Part of what occurs to me as you speak is that I'm almost hearing there's kind of tiers of bringing social emotional well-being in. The very first is whether you're a parent, an educator, an administrator, the school nurse or social worker. We first start by attending to our own well-being, and then we carry this out in the one-on-one relationships. And with the integrity and strength of that, then we can kind of rise up almost to the level of what would almost be more systemic, or a curriculum, or an intervention, or an approach in a classroom. But if you start with what's our plan and what's going to be our intervention or our strategy, and it doesn't have the support underneath of authentic one-on-one relationships that are supported by authentic connection to self, that curriculum will be empty and vacant, because you'll say, how are you? But you're not going to be coming from here.
Right. Yeah. I like that.
I want to
saw
acknowledge
somebody.
people
somebody
are writing.
Put some chat. Do we want to check in with that?
Let's check the chat. And if we have 10 more minutes. So informally, this was scheduled for 45 minutes, but how about, Seth, if we just open it for 10 minutes of Q&A for other thoughts and reflections from folks? So are there questions there, or some beautiful comments? Feel free to, folks, everybody can jump into the chat space to put forth questions for Seth if you have some that have been bubbling, or comments you want to offer.
So I'm looking at Mark's, how it feels to be a thinker in this illogical environment. How might they be able to access safety? So I'm not really sure what the question is. I'm trying to figure that out. I wonder if, Mark, if you want to type more.
Go back in the chat. Okay.
I'll go backwards.
Okay. Kids want to feel there's someone a teacher excited to see and engage them from a place of what's the purpose to do pretend school virtually. So they need a sense of purpose. Why are we here? Why are we doing this?
And I also see, how do we support colleagues who may not be used to doing this for themselves? So how do we support them as they start to do it with students? Oh, this is probably where the thinkers came in. Prior to that, how do you support colleagues who are thinkers, not accustomed to language of feelings? Okay, got it. Myers-Briggs thinkers. Now I understand the question. Well, I can say this, in IFS, we believe everybody has a very similar core self, right? That we are naturally below the surface. They say like self is like the sun, and our parts are like the clouds. So my hunch would be, if I lead as a thinker and I'm not very emotional, I would see that as a part of us that's in the lead. So I think even something like we just did, like, yeah, you know, that if you're a thinker, that's helped you throughout your life. That's really got you to where you are now. I would think we would need to do exercises with our teachers and maybe in services around not so much like shaming their thinking mind, but maybe it's an and. Like, okay, yeah, thinking has helped you in so many ways. So let's now see if we can tap you into a different part of you, the part of you that's more open, compassionate, and as even it might even intrigue your thinker to watch. Like we often ask our parts to step aside. Like, what if we ask our thinking mind just to step back and take notes as a researcher? Look what happens when you step aside for a moment, and we can drop into more of a heartfelt sense. And you'll see that, and I do this with my clients all the time, even like people who are like engineers and scientists, when they can do that, they also drop into that same place with this natural wisdom and compassion and clarity. Mm-hmm. So I think that you would need to do some experiences with people just to get a felt sense of the difference. Mm-hmm. And we need that. So, okay, now that you've seen that, researcher, come back into my mind, thinker, and how do we use that data that we just gathered when we let the heart kind of see? Now we know, okay, this child needs blank. Now use your thinking mind to develop some activities or to honor that.
I could also add with what I did this week with the schools that I was meeting with, and it was it's kind of cool, Seth, because it's along the lines of what you were describing. I led a sort of a self-awareness reflection, and I said, if you're into meditation, mindfulness, you want to close your eyes, fine. If you want to keep your eyes open and just write down, that's fine. I said, if you could just like imagine you could turn your gaze inside and just check out the inner landscape to notice what have been the thoughts, the feelings, the sensations that have been bubbling up in you lately? What's been rising up inside? What buttons are getting pushed? Have you been? So I made a lot of space and permission that if what's been coming up is different types of thoughts, just notice what's been on your mind. What have you been thinking about? So the nice thing and the helpful thing I find with IFS is when we talk about the fact that we have these different parts of us, sometimes the side of us shows up with emotions. Sometimes the way we become aware of a side of us is through the thinking. It's worrying, it's anticipating, it's trying to figure it out. Fine. So I ask people to kind of just notice and start naming the different sides of them that were coming up.
Right.
And then to imagine with an exhale, imagine they could blow it out and just get a little breathing space, a little separation. So we're not getting rid of the thinking parts of us. We're just noticing and naming them. And the power for me in this model is when we activate the awareness to notice these different sides of ourselves, that action of noticing lets us drop back into ourselves. It brings us into more of a witness state, more of a mindful state, more of a centered space. And then lo and behold, we've dropped more into self. And then I watched on these calls, sometimes in one call, I think I even had 75 staff members. So we were on double screens and all the grids, and it was so moving because as they were, I invited as a group to start speaking for the parts. A part of me has been feeling this, and on the other hand, the side's feeling that. I felt like they were able to sink into a safe space to name their own emotions. So that's what you were saying, Seth, giving them a felt sense of what they can do.
Right. And I see two more questions that I really like. One, how do we make a difference individually when perhaps our colleagues want results? Slowing down in the school environment can be so hard. And somebody else said, how would we adjust resistance to that? There's a sense of comfort and safety knowing and holding on to that thinker part. So for the first question, how do we make a difference when our colleagues want results? The only thing I could say to that is when I was a preschool teacher, parents used to say to me, why aren't you helping these preschool students figure out how to stand in line and how to wait patiently? Why don't you bring in desks and teach them how to sit and raise their hand so they're ready? And I know it from an early childhood development model, that's not using our time wisely. We only have so much time, and I want them to be deeply engaged in learning. So I'm like, that's going to happen. Why would I want to start now? you know. So in the same sense, like, I know if I trust this model, that if I trust that if I'm addressing their emotional needs as a way to get to academic growth, your classroom probably will have more academic growth than the ones that are pressuring you to not talk about their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you stay true to what you notice, like if you start experimenting with addressing the emotional needs of your students, you will see they will be able to engage deeper into learning, which is, so it is a results-based method without focus. If you focus on the results, we lead with parts of us that create stress. If we focus on nurturing the learner, the the academic results is like a beautiful byproduct, you know. So like if I teach my children the love of reading, they're going to soar through their literature courses in school.
Mm-hmm.
If I write with them and we write letters to each other and we talk about exploring the human condition through writing, then when it's time to do an assignment, it's a breeze.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, engaging kids in learning because it's meaningful and because it means something to them and it's a topic they're interested in. And for ourselves, you're right that we might feel resistance to giving up our thinking mind, because our thinking mind has helped us get this far.
Mm-hmm.
And you can actually thank your thinking mind. That's how you actually, that's what happens. The resistance actually will soften if we say thinking mind, like, or as we would say in IFS, it's like we see that as the entity, like a part of you that's been thinking, like, thank you so much for everything you've done to get me to this place. You do help me very much. I don't want to kick you out. I'm not looking to lose you. I'm just asking you for a little space so my heart could also be here. So my openness and curiosity could also be here. And I need you to help me figure out when the data comes in, to help me integrate all that. So that's how I would answer that question.
Okay. So we're just about at 5 o'clock. Was there one more question you wanted to get to there, Seth?
The last one I see. I need to.
There's a lot in there. It's great. I appreciate you all for
I think
jumping in the
Mark
chat.
Mark, I think you just reiterated what I just said, that to affirm and even thank the thinker part, then invite connection to the feeling. Yeah. And also know that, I guess the last thing I want to say is just hitting me that our culture really doesn't value feelings. I mean, if you look at the media and if you look at even the rugged individualistic ness of our society. I mean, the downside of like how we've set up our society here is that you need to make it yourself. You need to be strong enough. And that has helped us in so many ways. But the unintended consequence is that our kids are alone. That message makes it feel like I don't have support. So this is kind of counter culture to say we need to be a little bit more collectivist in some ways, not shifting our whole way of being, but like we need each other. Humans need each other. We need to collaborate. And you know, we spend so much time and money with our physical health. Why do we think our mental health is something that should be in the shadows? You know, and we're not talking about, you know, doing psychology with the students or doing therapy with the students. We're talking about knowing that unless you feel confident and secure and curious and open, learning's not going to happen. So we can keep pounding it down their throats, but it's just not going to stick. Because even those parts of the brain aren't activated unless they're feeling safe.
Yeah. And it's all of these ways of connecting to ourselves, getting into that space, seeing them, nurturing, valuing, all of that is what creates what I hear you mean by that safety, that that space and that cocoon and that environment where their system it's regulated, it's calm, it's present, it's online, and natural curiosity. I mean, it's the nature of the human species. We're curious, we're engaged, we want to learn, we want to know, we want to grow.
Right.
So if we just create that fully safe environment, learning's inevitable then, isn't
Right.
it? Rather
And
than
even,
this rugged
yeah,
trying thing.
and I know we got to go, but I'll say this,
Yeah.
even if there's a lot of external constraints, like there's poverty, there's problems at home, we know this isn't easy. But if that's our, you know, we're shooting for the stars and you land on the moon kind of thing, if you're shooting for that, any amount of progress, even if the students feel your intent to want to be there for them,
Yeah.
even if you can't make a difference and you can't make them feel safe, the intent that I'm here hoping you can be safe, you are now an anchor for them. They have someone who cares about them, that, and that something in them hopefully could shift to know that they're not alone in this process, that their teacher is not only someone teaching them, the teacher actually cares about them. And if you think of the teachers you loved, it's probably the ones that cared about you.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And what a perfect note for us to be wrapping up on. So, Seth, I want to thank you so much for your time and wisdom today, but it's the fruit of your years of study and clearly deep personal reflection and dedication to all these related professions. So thank you so much for that. And people are asking if this is going to be recorded and made available. And yes, thank you to Jason Malley, who is a teacher at the Technical High School here in Hartford. He is also lending his great expertise to help make these recordings available. So I think they'll probably be available in their entirety, and also we'll be pulling out some shorter pieces that you can pass on and share to colleagues. Hopefully we'll start having this, and also we've had 3 other sessions available within the week. You'll find it on the website for the Foundation for Self-Leadership. And also I'll put that up on my website for the Self-Leadership Collaborative. And we have 2 more sessions. Next week, we have Jody Nelson, who has brought IFS to teachers in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area. And she brings more of like the mental health lens as well to all of this work. And then in our final week, I'm going to invite a whole mixture of the teachers who've been practicing self-leadership in their schools here in Connecticut to come and share little nuggets of their stories. So I hope you all can join in the coming weeks and or partake by the recordings. And to the community who's with us here in this moment, I want to thank you for everything you're doing in any and all ways that you're touching our children, our young people, our families, our community. And may we continue to just discover, how do I connect into that source, because all that giving and solutions and discovery can flow from there. So
do you think it'd be okay if everybody turned their video back on so we can see their faces to say goodbye?
yeah, that'd be sweet. Yeah, if you have a minute and you haven't left yet, then come back. Emma.
It's nice to see everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And you see my name there. If you want to connect with me in any way, if you just do sethkopald.com, SETHKOPALD. All my contact is there. I love connecting with people.
And you also have a Facebook page, right? It's a parenting Facebook page?
Yeah, it's the IFS self-led parenting page.
Great.
But yeah, if you in my email is just seth@sethkopald.com. So if you have any questions or
great.
Yeah. Good to see you.
So thank you all. And thank you again, Seth.
You're welcome. This was great. It's
yeah,
nice to see all your faces. Thanks for being with us on a Sunday.
Have a good afternoon.
Yeah.